storage, and X can be anywhere from 3 to 10. On another sense of the word, storage is the greatest drag. In other words, most of the deployments that do have problems tend to be around the storage, and I/O in particular. So here's a couple of things to consider with virtual desktop and storage. It's not just how much. You know, for time immemorial, we've been trying to size storage just by capacity. You know, how many bytes do you need, of what type of storage, you know, et cetera, et cetera. Well, with VDI, it's really how much, how fast. And the how fast part is actually a very, very important point. So when you size a VDI or a virtual desktop installation, and not just VDI, you know, normal virtual desktop on server, but remote desktop access, stream desktop, streams apps, you know, all the various methods that one can get to a virtual desktop, including iPad, by the way, which I use in a remote desktop app sense, and it works very, very well. And, you know, having network shares there available to you on iPad is also a big key. Somebody mentioned local storage. So how much, how fast is very important. The earlier discussion about how do you, you know, size and measure environments for virtual desktop, that's not only important, that's extremely important in storage. You have to know your access patterns. You have to know your I/O patterns. And in general, you know, a set of virtual desktops or clients that are accessing desktops virtually are going to take all those nice, clean individual streams and randomize them. So if you're using centralized storage, which most people do, behind the scenes for virtual desktop, you're going to translate all those nice, well-behaved streams into a not very nice, extremely unwell-behaved stream of I/O. It's going to be random. It's going to be a read-write mix, no question about it. So key to that is to do the scaling approach, test and verify and measure I/O workloads at small scale with a small number of seats. Even something as small as a dozen seats, all doing random access I/O, you know, again, when put together, you're going to get a very good idea about the scaling approach to storage. And again, not just how much, but how much, how fast. Boot storms are a particularly prevalent barrier to a good adoption. Boot and login is something we do once, but it turns out to be the very high Pareto I/O workload. And I've done individual testing even 2 years ago. I spoke at Flash Memory Summit about Windows 7 and booting. And a clean Windows 7 boot might take anywhere from 100 to 250,000 I/Os, and a Windows 7 desktop boot with lots and lots of background services and antivirus and all the automatic application starts, that might take 1 million I/Os, half of which are writes because you're using a page file. So all of that has to be considered for storage, as well as what then is your steady state application workload. Are you streaming the app to the desktop? Are you accessing apps remotely, driving I/O to the desktop, in particular graphics over the network? So all that workload has to be considered. And again, you see this huge bottleneck effect where the individual I/O streams, maybe it's only 5 or 10 IOPS per seat, which is a figure that some vendors use. Other vendors use 20 or 30 IOPS per seat. And again, that's why measurement and the project, the scaling approach is so important for storage. Because it's not the bytes that'll kill you, it's the IOPS that'll kill you, and then in turn the response to that. You know, I've sat in a number of virtual desktop deployments, and the constant theme from the users, you know, sitting in the seat is, you know, I want my machine to boot just as fast or faster than it does with a local disk. And the same thing for log in and log out. Log in and log out are the number 2 and number 3 generator of I/O, because you're flushing out things to disk, and another consideration is, do you allow users to save to desktop? If you do, that puts a completely different twist on the I/O streams and where you segregate that save to desktop I/O away versus using a thin or a cloned version of the desktop image itself. So all those things have to be taken into account. And again, you wouldn't think so. You think, hey, storage is storage, right? It's just there. But it turns out to be, in my opinion, the number one consideration when doing any kind of non-trivial virtual desktop implementation.
Hey, Dave,
Yes.
this is Mike Alvarado. I have a question about storage.
Hey, Mike.
I wonder if people or your panel can comment on LUN locking and its particular challenges in virtualized environments.
Jason had a good smile.
I did. Historically, I've not been a huge fan of NFS. I see a lot more NFS adoption specifically because of VDI and the way, you would have a large multitude of VMs that need to lock a LUN at a specific time. Doing NFS obviously has some huge advantages for high quantity VM environments. A lot of
Dave?
people aren't. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, just to clarify, this is using SCSI persistent reservation, so at the block level.
Right.
Yeah. So this is. Oh, go ahead. I'll
After you.
I was going to say, so for at that level, you're doing block access I/O. There are certainly some implementations that use, persistent reserve at the LUN level. Interestingly enough, some of the more, shall we say, wise implementations are looking at extent level reserves, which is much more productive, especially in a virtual desktop and virtual server environment. And I think you're going to see more and more implementations do that. Now, that, of course, takes cooperation between the initiators and the targets. But, yeah, whole LUN locking level is going to be increasingly difficult. And that really is one issue which has forced people to go to NFS, and NFS version 4 especially because of the much better, op locking and the handshaking that's going on in NFS version 4. But I think if you're going to do SCSI, you should really do extent level reserves, and getting the hypervisors and the clients to understand that is key.
So we got a couple questions from the Justin audience. One is actually from Nick Allen. He says, do you have any examples of VDI failures due to the lack of data or lack of analysis or poor design, i.e., do you have any real-world learning experience that users on the call could draw from? Any sort of watch out and gotchas that you guys have?
Well, without mentioning customers, yes.
I do too.
Yeah, I mean,
What's the biggest
I'm not gonna
mistake
name
you see?
any.
What's the biggest mistake you see?
Lack of planning.
And what does that result in? Just a bad user experience, higher costs,
Yeah.
failed projects?
It's everything, right, Dave? So, I mean, if you don't plan it, you don't know what your users are doing, and therefore, and I think is the ultimate. So, I mean, as we play this ball game of VDI, if you get the end user wrong, you can pick up your bat, your ball, and your glove, and you can go home because it's game over.
Right, and to kind of move further into that, if, a lot of people, what they're seeing, a lot of customers, what they're seeing is they're seeing, for lack of a better term, virtual desktop sprawl, right? So they put it together, they've got a specific category of their users in mind for the solution, and they build for that category of users. And what ends up happening is more and more users, kind of, back in the old terminal server days, right, they see more and more use cases for terminal server and Citrix, so you get more and more users on there. Well, I'm seeing that, and it goes back to what Michael was saying about lack of planning. If you don't plan on, scalability and sustainability, then yeah, you're going to run into problems when you start, loading user after user into your. I didn't mean to say loader. That was a slip of the tongue, by the way. User after user onto your infrastructure. Yeah, you're going to bog it down, and everybody's experience is going to stink out loud. So
Right.
yeah, I mean, planning and being able to, figure out what you need today, but what you're going to need, tomorrow is, a big part of that. And, it goes back to what Michael said with planning. It's like you cannot implement something just as a solution for your users today. You have to be looking forward and thinking about sustaining it and how you're going to support it for the next 10, 20 years. I mean, it's not, these solutions aren't meant to be, temporary solutions.
Yeah, I'd like to piggyback real quick, and I agree with everything the panel said. Kind of to the other piece, so planning's up front, I'll say I see a huge lack of operational readiness, right? So a design's been planned and implemented, and great, it's time for the consultants to pack up and fly home, but the customer's not ready to use it. They don't know how to maintain it. How do they apply patches? So I'd say operational readiness is a big one, and then maybe a little more in the weeds, virtual networking, specifically how the virtual switches are configured. So, for example, in a highly volatile, non-persistent environment where you got VMs being created and blown away, potentially very, very often, depending on how the virtual switches are set up from a port assignment level. In vSphere, there's 3 options: static, dynamic, ephemeral. If you've got static, I guarantee you're going to have some issues if you've got a volatile environment, just because you're going to run out of ports. It's still going to hold it like a stale DHCP lease. So that's something else. I get calls on that all the time. But yeah, planning, operational readiness, and then how you're doing the networking inside the virtual infrastructure.
Yeah, so picking up on
end user acceptance, right? End user acceptance testing is critical, and a lot of times you don't see that being done. You don't see them going through a phase where they're actually testing with, the users who are going to be the ones that are actively using it. You see them testing with IT people. So, you're not seeing a very highly structured consistently. I'm not saying that everybody does this. Some customers do it right, but you're not seeing them really have a well-orchestrated, end user acceptance phase where the users are testing it and telling them what works and what doesn't, so that, by the time it goes live, it's working the way it's, assumed to be working, right? It's the way you want it to work.
So thank you for that, Glenda. So we have another follow-up from NetMag Dave on the networking question. He said, I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about some of the networking issues to support VDI. Won't moving desktops between offices be subject to the bandwidth availability of the interconnecting links? And how do you address that? Is it, WAN optimizers? Or what are your experiences there?
Michael or Glenda?
I haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, I mean, elaborate a little more. I would say the vast majority of implementations I've been a part of have been primarily same campus, same post, same building. From a overall
local area network.
Go ahead, I'm sorry, Glenda.
Oh, no, I was just saying it's all local area network right now, and it's wildly successful. There's still some challenges with wide area networks that everybody's actively working on.
Yeah, keep it local for now, it sounds like. Okay. All right, good. I wanted to stop here and just open it up to the audience here and see if anybody else has any questions. As I say, everybody's welcome here. I want to make sure that everybody has an opportunity. We've got some other discussion points that we want to drill into, but any comments, questions for the panel?
This is David Floyer. Can I put a question to the panel on a completely different line? Listening to the discussion, and it seems the major use case, as you were just pointing out, is desktop, Windows desktops in one location with a relatively large number of people. And looking at the growth in the marketplace of iPhones and iPads and the whole tremendous growth in the web and in the cloud, looking at it from a point of view of a CIO, is this strategic at all, or is this just the last attempt to make Windows actually work? Is it an old mainframe-like environment which is on its last legs, and Google Apps and MobileMe and the new investment of iTunes on the internet is going to make it relevant?
Yeah, so
just like their opinion.
Yeah, so what about that? Is virtual desktop just squeezing a little bit more value out of the existing client infrastructure, or is it transformative?
This is Glenda. I'll take that. I mean, I know for a fact, just based on what we've heard a lot about in the blogs and what you're hearing from different companies is, they're actively working on, getting different operating systems, support for, virtual desktops, meaning Linux and Macintosh. And I think that, it's kind of, the way I've been looking at it lately is more of a perfect storm, right, where a whole bunch of different technologies have all of a sudden finally come to an alignment point where they can deliver this solution to, the business as well as the consumer market. And I think that, with this proliferation of the access devices, it's not just going to be, and also with like Google Apps and things like that, it's not just going to be business uses for this technology. It's also